let you know there ain't no heaven. Oh Lord, there ain't no heaven. There ain't no heaven.
Well, I'm bored and don't really have anything better to do today, so let's look over some more of this escaping atheism bollocks, shall we? So this is from a lovely little article on there called Why Atheism is Ridiculous. Nowadays, atheists define their position as lack of belief in God or gods. This definition itself is idiotic. By defining their position as lack of belief, that means that bricks, dust motes, and people in comas are atheists. It saves himself somewhat by saying that you have to have the capacity for belief before, so from absurdity to at least something that's relatively relevant. Though I'd object to the person in a coma, they may or may not believe in God, their consciousness is just suspended while they're comatose. So their beliefs will presumably still exist one way or the other when they wake up. So there you go. But that is the definition of atheism since at least the 16th century. It has had multiple uses because it's been used as a pejorative, but at least since then, and according to just about any dictionary of philosophy or treatise on the subject that you care to mention, it's either belief that there's no God, which is called strong atheism or Gnostic atheism, or the absence of belief in God, which is called weak atheism or agnostic atheism, and the vast and overwhelming majority of atheists are agnostic atheists. So really, in the broadest possible sense, encompassing everybody under that label of atheism, all it is I don't believe in God. That's it. They claim that this lack of belief doesn't have any additional impact on other beliefs. Atheism is usually a result of other beliefs. This is false, as observing and questioning their other beliefs shows in addition to believing that atheism is a lack of belief in God or gods, they will also believe with high certainty. Well, let me stop you there, because okay, there's lots of similar reasons that people become atheists, but as I said in the previous video, atheism is the flower, not the cake. People may tend to cluster around a series of beliefs, including atheism, but that's usually as a result of their other outlooks, like rationalism, skepticism, a belief in the value of science. But let's look at these, shall we? That matter is all that exists. That's a result of a rationalist scientific viewpoint. There are atheists that don't think that. There are atheists that believe in ghosts and psychic phenomena and all kinds of other stupidity that the skeptics and rationalists amongst us would criticise them for. But atheism has no impact on that. That theists are delusional, irrational, brainwashed, or lying about their beliefs. These are all possible, but again, not every atheist believes that. Again, if you take a scientific and rational point of view about things, if you take a logical view about things, then religious beliefs are necessarily delusional, because they are, in the definition of delusional disorder, a fixed false belief held without or against evidence. That's the definition of delusion. Religious beliefs do not have evidence, ergo they meet the definition of a delusional disorder. Irrational? Absolutely, there's no rational reason to believe these things. Brainwashed? Possibly. Religion and political beliefs are roughly equally brainwashed in liberal societies. Lying about their beliefs? Quite possible. Some people do because they find it comforting or they don't want to challenge or upset other people around them. These are all possibilities. But I think every atheist would admit that there are some people who genuinely believe what they believe, however stupid they happen to think that might be. But the point is that these are not a result of atheism. They're a result of many of the same processes that lead people to be atheists. So your criticism there is not of atheism, it's of rationalism, of logic, of reason, of the application of scientific thinking. It's not a criticism of atheism, because atheism is a result of those same applications. So if you want to attack atheism, you're going to have to go after the things that result in atheism. Science, reason, logic, all of those things. That's what you need to be attacking, and good fucking luck. That science is our most reliable way of knowing truth, because it often overturns itself. Well, yes, science is our most reliable way of knowing truth. There's nothing else that we've done that isn't at least related to the scientific method that actually turns up truth. I mean, all the apparatus that I'm using, the networks, the electricity, the microphone pickup, the video pickup, all of that is the result of scientific inquiry. I'm talking to you through a computer on the internet, not through a prayer box, through the karma sphere. That's not how it works. And science's ability to overturn itself when it discovers that it's wrong is a huge strength in science. And it's something that you don't find in other beliefs, such as religious beliefs, which stick dogmatically to what they believe and refuse to change. At least refuse to change without an immense amount of bloodshed. So where's the problem there? There isn't one. And again, that scientific outlook results in atheism. It's not that atheism results in a scientific outlook.
Science is interesting, and if you don't agree, you can fuck off.
If God exists, human beings are intelligent, wise, and moral enough to pass judgment on God's actions and motives. Well, God doesn't exist, so that's not really an issue here at all. Or at least there's no evidence that God exists, so whether a God exists or not, we're on our own to make moral judgments. However, we are not beings of infinite power, and this is the most important aspect here. So if we can come up with better solutions than a putative God concept can, then that does demonstrate a flaw in the God concept. For example, if you look at human suffering and say that this is all part of God's plan, surely a being of infinite intelligence and infinite power could come up with a way to achieve the same goal without human suffering. Otherwise, you are putting limitations upon your God concept and saying it is not omnipotent, not omniscient, not able to come up with solutions better than humans can. You know, any potential remotely possible hypothesis that we could come up with that might be better should be happening if such a being existed. But that's really beside the point and way off base if we're talking about atheism.
Wait, here comes another one. Quick, give me your lighter.
It is appropriate to worry about the effects of religion on people, but there's no reason to worry about atheism. Well, here's the difference. Religions tend to come with an instruction manual, which includes things like kill the infidel, for example. Atheism comes with no instruction manual. It is not a set of commandments, it is not a set of beliefs, it is not even a belief. It's the absence of a singular belief. Atheism, in and of itself, has zero motivational effect upon someone. Like I say, it's the flower, not the cake. Whereas something like Christianity is a cake, something like Islam is a cake, something like Buddhism is a cake. It's everything together. Now, each of those things may have ingredients, such as belief in God, or commandments from on high, or we have a holy scripture. But those can be found, in commonality across different religions. So that's an ingredient in the same way. But atheism, in and of itself, which is what you're trying to criticize here, and failing utterly, is just the absence of a singular belief. That's it. It is no more meaningful or relevant to people's behaviour than an absence of belief in the Yeti, or ghosts, or the Loch Ness Monster. It has no content other than rejection of the belief in a god. And it's usually, again, the result of people's other beliefs. That's it. Morality has no objective basis, and some form of preference utilitarianism is the appropriate moral framework. Again, this has nothing to do with atheism, but it's a conclusion that could be drawn from scientific rationalism and logic. I mean, it's obvious to anyone who subscribes to those beliefs, atheist or not, that morality does have no objective basis. There is no commandment from on high, or at least there's no evidence to suggest that there's any commandment on high. What there may be is some kind of evolved commonality because we're a social species, which is why we would punish things like cheating or violence, that sort of thing. So there may be an evolved common human basis for morality, but that's not really objective because other animals would evolve different bases for morality. Though we see similarities in behaviour between humans and other animals, even rats can feel jealous or can empathise with a fellow rat's pain and that sort of thing. And certainly in the other ape species and in monkey species, we see similar behaviours and punishments and so on that we see in human society. But that's not to say that it's subjective, because this is the result of evolutionary pressures. So it's still subjective to our species. But again, this has fuck all to do with atheism. So there you go. Atheism's just I don't believe in God. That's it. I have to keep hammering this point until you get it. It seems obvious to us that these are not merely lacks of belief. Well, no, because you've strayed beyond atheism, which is a lack of belief, to other things that people will believe. But that's beyond the scope of atheism, and it's usually these beliefs that result in atheism, but many other beliefs can result in atheism too. They only make sense if the proposition God exists is false. Not necessarily. The mere absence of evidence for a God is sufficient reason to consider it false, whether or not it is, and in which case we should proceed as though it is false. So what you need to do is to come up with some kind of evidence for a God. You don't understand what you're criticizing, and this is the problem. If you want to criticize these other things, these other beliefs, then by all means go ahead, but don't conflate it all with atheism. So there you go. Most of this is just the repetition of the same mistakes over and over, but there's one good example in this article that I'd like to touch on. Okay, so it says, materialism, the belief that material is all there is, limits what's explainable. Theists know that everything atheists say exists actually does, as well as more, the supernatural. No, you do not know that the supernatural exists. You have no evidence. You have no way of showing that the supernatural exists. You believe that the supernatural exists. You do not know that the supernatural exists. For example, a materialist must say that consciousness is an emergent property of matter interactions, that it somehow in a way we don't understand comes from matter. There's nothing wrong with saying you don't understand. You don't have to make up some kind of supernatural explanation. You don't. I mean, we know that complex systems can emerge from simple systems. And we know that the brain is material, and we know that if you damage the brain, you damage the expression of consciousness. These are all suggestive, very strongly, that consciousness is rooted in the physical. So how are you going to get around that? Even if we don't understand how, we can understand that it is rooted in the physical, that it relates to it. You can't demonstrate the existence of a soul. You can't demonstrate the existence of anything metaphysical. You can't show any of that, and until you can't, you have no basis upon which to argue. And that's your problem, not ours. And it ends with a nonsense tweet you're supposed to send out to your atheist friends on Twitter. Theism is as reasonable of a position to take as atheism. It isn't. There is no evidence for theism. It is thereby inherently an unreasonable position to take. I'm not sure if God exists, but the religious tradition has brought us science, so it can't be all bad. The religious tradition has not brought us science per se. Rather, once religion has gotten out of the way, whether it be in the Islamic Golden Age or the flowering of the Enlightenment and the Renaissance, when religion started to back off and be overcome, that's when we made our advances. So religion has retarded us. In the very beginnings, it may have provided some kind of impetus for people to try and learn about the world, in that, oh, we must try and understand God's creation. But the moment we began to get any genuine understanding that contradicted the ridiculous scriptural ideas, then religion tended to get in the way, kill people, imprison them, and otherwise retard scientific progress. We see that still today in the resistance to stem cell research, still, or the resistance to evolution, still, in schools, because they recognise that it contradicts their beliefs in a powerful and evidenced way, and that's a problem. I'm not sure what God is, but theists might know, and if they do, maybe they should worship God. Nobody knows what God is, nobody knows whether a God exists or not. Theists have absolutely, virtually zero chance of knowing in any case, because they're not undergoing any kind of rational process to try and unpick and uncover and discover and evidence what that God might be. They just believe, for no reason, other than perhaps personal emotional comfort, but that seems to be about it. You know, when you're looking for a scientific discovery, you don't just throw a dart into the darkness and hope you hit the right thing. You engage in an investigative process. Religion has no such investigative process, no evidential process, no falsification process. It just feels. Nobody believes in sky fairies. We should stop using that as an insult. It's a deliberate reductio absurdum. It's to show you how absurd your beliefs are. If you just reframe the language, your terminology, such as God, has an inherent respect due to centuries of oppression on your part, of insistence, of tradition, and so on. So when you reframe it as Sky Fairy, it shows it up for how ridiculous it is. If you find that insulting and ridiculous, you should find God as insulting and ridiculous a term as Sky Fairy, because it's the same thing, a mythological thing that lives in some other place with no evidence for it. Look, Dean and anybody else who's associated with this pointless enterprise, you have to start from understanding who and what you're criticising. And you don't. You're mistaking atheism for other things such as rationalism and scientific inquiry and logic and reason and skepticism. You're conflating all these things together and then attacking atheism on the basis of these other things. That's not how you're going to get anywhere. I don't think you're going to get anywhere anyway, but you have to understand what you're criticising and what you're attacking before you even start doing this. And everything I read on this stupid site of yours just demonstrates your own ignorance of the very things you suppose yourself to be criticising. That shouldn't surprise me, because study after study shows that non-believers seem to know far more about religion and religious philosophy than religious people do. Perhaps because they're interested and they inquire and they question and they examine in a way that you don't. If you want a dialogue, if you want to understand, you have to at the very least understand what atheism is and isn't, and how it is defined and used by atheists, because those are the people you're attacking. That's the idea that you're attacking, or just the absence of belief that you're attacking. Until you grasp that, you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to get anywhere anyway, but at least if you grasp that, you won't be humiliated quite so badly. Zang. If you like what I do here, please like, subscribe, share on your social media, and if you feel so inclined, you can support me on Patreon at Grimature. My main website is postmortemstudios.wordpress.com, and there, or on Twitter, you can keep up with me and everything that I'm doing.